Got it.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Regeneration Podcast. I'm your co-host, Michael Martin, with my friend and colleague, Mike Sauter. How's it going, Mike?
Things are all fine and well in the upstate. Sent the Hemlock Little World's Fair. It's the largest Little World's Fair, it's called, in my little hamlet. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people flood our small town. And didn't enter anything this year, Mike, so I didn't take home any blue ribbons, but over the years, baby, over the years.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. We those of us in small towns of North America take our county fairs seriously.
Yeah, very seriously. Especially the one quick story is, like, we don't live too far from Canada, but like when they have some of their monster truck rallies, they'll open with like a 4-wheeler race, and they just recruit like 8 young people from this town, and they put a Canada jacket on 4 and an America jacket on the other, and then they race around this oval as the crowd's getting warmed up, and you'll look around and you'll people screaming with like the veins popping out of their neck, just hating on the Canadians so bad, right? And they're so real, and they have no idea they've just recruited these boys to play the villains, but the villains are Canadians. Small town fairs in upstate New York, gotta love it.
Well, the villains are still our Canadians, because that infernal smoke is still coming over my house. I may never breathe.
Yeah, we got it too. We got it too.
Yeah. So anyway, so today, though, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have a special show, because
very special.
This is a show by request, because at our 1-year anniversary show, a couple of commentators said, "Hey, you guys should do a show on Terrence Malick." Mm-hmm. Which is, if anybody who's read my books, you see I'm quoting him all the time, because when I encountered Terrence Malick's work, and I wouldn't have, I don't think, had my friend Terry Burns from the Corktown Popes, who was on our bumper music. He said, "Mike, you got to see this movie," and it was The Tree of Life. And I saw The Tree of Life, and I was blown away. Because not only by the cinematography and the unique storytelling, but also by what I can only call a sociological vision of things. And then after that, I saw, I kind of went back, I backtracked, and I saw Thin Red Line, which I'll never forget, because I was talking. This is when Mary Grove College was still around, and I was talking to my philosophy department confreres. I said, "You guys seen this movie?" I said, "Oh yeah, I love that movie." I said, "I think it's Being in Time, the movie." It was the most Heideggerian film I've ever seen, because it's about authenticity and care in the face of total war. And then I finally, after that, then I discovered that Terrence Malick actually translated an essay of Martin Heidegger's. And if you know, in my book, which one is it? The Incarnation of the Poetic Word. It's my most Heideggerian book. And this is around the time that I was really investigating this. And I think, there is I shouldn't say no more, but I can't think of a more important religious filmmaker, and I can only call him a religious filmmaker, than Terrence Malick. And our guest today, Reno Lauro, is we met through Facebook, I believe it was, and I don't remember how this went, but I found out along the way that actually Reno not only knows or has met, but knows Terrence Malick. And Reno, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
And thank you so much.
Tell us the story. Tell us the story of how that happened.
Yeah. The story precedes me in many ways. So I was finishing my PhD at the University of St. Andrews at the Institute for Theology, Imagination, and the Arts, and had returned back stateside to kind of finish writing the Beast, and had run into a friend, Mark Spacek, who's actually Sissy Spacek's nephew.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Nephew, yeah. And so, and this is Austin. We had known each other since kind of the mid '90s. But I asked him what he was up to, and he said, "Hey, I'm working on out in Smithville, driving cars back and forth, working in the art department." "Oh, doing what?" "Oh, Terry's shooting a film out there." And I was in total shock because the New World had just come out in 2005. I'm not sure, Michael, if you all have seen that, but it had just come out when I arrived in the UK, and I didn't think that another film would come out for forever. So to find out that not only was a new film coming out, but was actively shooting, I immediately scrambled. And so I sent in my CV through the Texas Film Commission, and I got a call the next day. And
wow.
Yeah. And so the voice on the other line, not Terry, but was like, "Hey, you look like you would be a perfect fit. We really need kind of all hands on deck. I got to tell you, I'm a little embarrassed to say I can't pay you right away." And I said, "Well, just tell me this, like, will I be on set to like watch people film?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, definitely." And I was like, "Okay, I'm done." So for about 2 weeks, 10 days, I was the most motivated and hustling water boy in the history of filmmaking. Just
few
kind
more
of
details, like what were the actual duties you did? You said water boy, but
yeah, well, when I got there, I was just slinging water
okay.
all over the place, and then kind of word had gone out that I was doing kind of a PhD. I was writing on Heidegger. I was in UK, and so somehow kind of it led to like a set apprenticeship, in which like I worked in basically every single department. So I did a lot of B unit, where I met my friend AJ Edwards. He became my best friend and best man at my wedding, who was shooting second unit, worked in props and set dressing, camera department. And then finally, when we went to Houston, I was Emmanuel Lubezki's personal assistant so all those scenes and what's called in the he's a cinematographer.
I thought so. Right.
Now, 3-time Academy Award-winning Emmanuel Lubezki, but just Chivo to everybody who knows him. But all the scenes with Sean Penn in the city, I got to kind of be Chivo's personal assistant, which was what was great about that. I mean, the only important thing about that was being able to like hang out inside the filming circle, and just getting to hear Terry whisper and kind of moving with the camera crew from location to location. And then somehow at the end, Sarah Green, invited me to post-production. And so as soon as, I think I took a month off and then kind of started into post-production, and I was Keith Frey's assistant. Keith was the principal editor for The Natural History, which became The Voyage of Time. So I kind of worked on 2 movies, The Voyage of Time and The Tree of Life. And basically I was kind of cutting editorial experiments. Terry would say, "Hey, let's get some Dow kind of, let's cut some scenes with the Respighi. And I just want to see a whole bunch of shots of movement with the Respighi. And then I'll come back and you show me what you have." So it was generosity was poured upon me that I was neither ready for nor worthy of. And we can talk more about that. But the most important aspect was really just kind of getting close and being able to talk and overhear and see what it is for a master like this to really do his craft. And I should say this to everybody. I still don't understand him. And so there's an ineffable gulf between my experience of Terry and who Terry really is. So everything that we talk about.
You named that gulf genius, or do you have a name for that gulf? Like,
no, it is. It is genius. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a gulf.
Yeah.
And so what is the characterize that genius for us? if you can?
Yeah, well, that's a great question and beautifully put. Let me say a little bit about what I've learned from that, because I was writing on Tolkien, right? And what I learned from this experience was to not trust biographers, and to not allow the investigation to kill the desired affect of the work, and the way that the work is meant to kind of move us in particular ways. I think the genius is an openness. So let's use that word, and we can kind of carry that out through our conversation. An openness. There is this aspect of retrieval, though I'm kind of pushing a little bit too much there. But there is an aspect of retrieval of the essential. It's a little bit too much of a Heideggerian sleight of hand, but a retrieval of an essential, and an openness to a call, right? A call to us. And so I think this conversation is really fantastic, because I think it actually, Michael, you're spot on with your instincts. I think that it opens up a for lack of a better term, like a biographical aspect of his interests that have really kind of for obvious reasons been overlooked or set to the side for easier, more approachable ideas and terms and works and purposes.
Right.
And Malick's got such a quirky biography as far as working in film goes, right? So his first film was Badlands, which came out in 1973 when I was 11. Nice. And then the next one was 78. What was that one? Days of Heaven.
Days of Heaven.
And then disappeared.
Yeah.
For just about 20 years until I think 97.
For 20 years. Okay. I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, until 97 when The Thin Red Line came out.
That's right. So, that's right.
Jesus had 33 years.
And also, a guy who abandoned his dissertation when he got into a dispute, at least this is the story, right? With his dissertation director. He's like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to go write movies. Bye. I admire a guy like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you'll like this even more. It was Gilbert Ryle. He had gone to the UK as a full, not a Fulbright, a Rhodes Scholar. And I didn't get the full story. Eckie Walls, Terry's wife, kind of gave me a little clue into it. But we should say, and this is the analytic Gilbert Ryle, right? So this is, 63, 64. So he had fully embraced kind of the analytic world and didn't see any value in writing about Kierkegaard, Heidegger.
Mm-hmm.
So
Terry,
he's like, forget it.
That's right. Yeah. Because there's a funny meme out there where a little kid goes to Santa Claus and says, I want a dragon. And a little boy and Santa Claus says, well, you can't have a dragon. Dragons aren't real. I want a dragon. Okay. Well, you can't have a dragon. Then he says, all right, I'll give you a choice. You can get a choice. I'll give you some analytical. Can I have some analytical philosophy? I'll give you a dragon, right? Philosophy.
Yeah.
And here's the thing too, Michael, that we can carry through as well. I mean, this notion of like, no, like this is there's a not a disposition towards not a disposition towards authenticity. That sounds, he had worked with Stanley Cavell at Harvard. He hadn't picked up classes at MIT yet, right? Because Hubert Dreyfus, he filled some classes in for Hubert Dreyfus when he came back at MIT. But he definitely has a sense, and this is a character of that genius, right? Not a sense of not being willing to compromise, but knowing the path, knowing what the path isn't, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
knowing what the path isn't.
And that's what I noticed through all of his films, but I really jumped out at me in The Tree of Life and The Thin Red Line is the kind of the phenomenological reduction, right? The epoche that you let, I mean, the last line in The Thin Red Line, all things shining, right? And that's to me, that's where sociology and philosophy meet at that moment right there, where you see that which shines through phenomena. And Terry's films are meditations on that. And you see it all through the play. In Thin Red Line, for instance, you see these soldiers kind of creeping up this hill on Guantanamo Bay, and then, which is juxtaposed with, seeing these breezes run through the tall grass, and then this native guy just walks right by them like he doesn't even see them, because there is a reality that he's depicting. And this is in The Thin Red Line, Jim Caviezel's character says, I seen another world, right? I seen another world. And this is what, and you see this through all these films. You see he's reaching for that other world. And even in all the messy stuff, right? With To the Wonder, right? With this complication of marriage and relationships, but there are still these things where this transcendence, this Sophianic light, kind of, not all the time, but at moments, radiates through not only the story, but the very medium of film itself.
Yeah, and so without ossifying those moments, or without embalming those moments in ways that
too precious, right?
Right. Yeah, they're precious, they're fleeting, and they're moments that move through time, rather than taking that moment to turn it into a postcard,
yes,
or a message. And I think that so, for instance, like when the islander is kind of just walking out of the brush, it is almost as though the line of troops are moving back into time, into a world that has been untouched by modern warfare, and this islander is emerging from time, without having to say it or do it, or even to spend time kind of nodding at it, but you feel these moments, and they're allowed to kind of speak to us, because primarily, and I'm going to continue to throw things out there so that to give you food for thought, but so that it can move us, right? When I finished working on Tree of Life, I wrote a couple of things, just trying to kind of process my thoughts, and and I think Terry appreciated them, but what he really wants is not for people to be thinking about his films. I know this for certain, but to be moved by them, to be not embraced by them, because that sounds a little too anthropomorphic, but I think to allow something in them. He used this phrase one time, to allow the screen to elicit the smile of life, right?
Yeah. Well, that's to let the film itself shine, right?
Yeah. The beings and reality and world to shine through them. Yeah. That's exactly that's exactly right. You know, I did not realize the significance or made the connections in back then, but two things along these lines that generally don't kind of come out in Terry's biographies or articles or anything like that, is that we had gotten on a conversation about education, and he had brought up Rudolf Steiner and brought up Waldorf schools.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And the importance and significance of that. And then I had found out through his producer, Sandhya Shahanadad, the importance of Krishnamurti, the writings of Krishnamurti,
interesting,
to Terry. And actually, and the way she described, and she may have oversold this, but you know, maybe not, but far more influence from Krishnamurti, I think, than anyone else has given credit. And I can imagine a world where Terry, kind of in Hollywood in the 70s, an experience that he told me, it just doesn't evoke like very good memories.
Right.
A world where he's reading, Krishnamurti and making sense of his own education and his own life and Western philosophy, kind of through those writings, can definitely lead to a, you know what, I'm gonna kind of disappear for a little bit until somebody's gonna let me make the movie I want to make.
Right. Well, and you can see part of that experience from in Hollywood that he revisits in The Knight of Cups.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, they're all extraordinary, but that's a pretty extraordinary piece of film right there.
Yes. Yeah.
And
that more time needs to be spent on. Yeah.
We talked about this before, Mike. Remember when we talked to David Bentley Hart about his book Kenogaya, which is based on the Hymn of the Pearl.
Same thing.
In the same, well, it's Cups also uses that as part of its narrative scaffolding. And ever since then, I've been using that film, clips from that film, but also the Hymn of the Pearl, in teaching college students, because they are basically living the Hymn of the Pearl, right? Why did my parents?
I think.
Why am I here again? And what I found, especially when we went through the COVID stuff with the schools shutting down and kids wearing masks and being confined to quarters, it was like paying $30,000 a year to go to prison because they couldn't leave the dorm. But their experience from that, that's the Hymn of the Pearl really resonated with them after that. And I showed them like the trailer or maybe some clips from The Knight of Cups to help illustrate. I mean, it's not just their condition, it's the human condition, right? It's every single one of us are like the boy in The Knight of Cups in the Hymn of the Pearl, who forgets who he is. And we have to remember why we've been sent here.
I was just thinking too, the Knight of Cups, you mentioned the theme, Reno, of openness. And I think I'd seen every previous film at one point or another before watching that in the theater. And I think it was the first time, you could get all kind of meta about it and think you had to be open, but it was great. I went to a theater and I think my body knew in front of that film, I just had to be open, right? And because so his films kind of create openness, but they also demand it, right? And I think to follow his career is kind of, that's a little form of practice of meditation in one sense. How do you sit? Who are you vis-a-vis this thing? If you kind of know his body of work, this thing you're going to experience, And I was also thinking too about it's almost because I needed to hear you say the exact words again, Reno, that when he's doing things, it's a moment in time, but it's still moving through time. Whereas opposed, I'm always bringing up young people, but and maybe you can say something about that. People are always capturing snapshots, yet they're getting more anxious all the time. And you're saying, by moving through these moments, it's not a pure second. That kind of jumped out at me, and when you were talking about that and Malick's genius, we were using that word. I just thought of this, this new propensity, not that we're just missing it by standing behind. Everybody says that if you're taking a picture of the Grand Canyon, you can't experience it. But even those pictures themselves are very unsatisfying.
Yeah. Well, the pictures being unsatisfying. There's a wonderful. Terry's very fond of Robert Bresson's notes on cinematography.
Okay.
He says that's the only book on film that anyone ever needs to read. It's film school in a book. And Bresson has for anyone who hasn't kind of experienced this text, it's essentially the notes are almost like aphorisms. Drain the pond to catch the fish. And one thing that sticks out based on what you said is this notion of not creating postcards, right? Not allowing images to be beautiful and to sit and to represent, right? To represent the world as one might hope that it is. And this is, André Bazin, the great French film theorist. He has this beautiful essay called The Ontology of the Photographic Image, in which he talks about the embalming of time in the photographic image, right? Like the photographic image, they're essentially photons, right? Photons are being captured onto this celluloid. And so there's an ontological relationship between what we see and what was there. But we always feel the lack when it comes to the photographic image, because one only needs to read just a couple of paragraphs of Aquinas or something like that, or even just Aristotle, to know that there's something more going on in matter than merely just the material itself. And so, how does one allow what is missing from what is captured in the photographic image to emerge? And duration is a part of that. But the thing that you were talking about, that the tactility of the cinema experience, which is so central to his search to uncover what has been captured on film, and to uncover the kind of truthful experiences that were attempted to be drawn out. Some kind of wayfinding path was attempted to be drawn out in a script. That the editing itself is done in that way to create that experience of moving through time, to experience the kind of the coming and going of a relationship to the fleeting experiences of life, which is the exact opposite of recording the concert with your camera.
Right. Exact opposite. You had to say exact opposite.
Those are butterflies in a shadow box, right?
The worst is the corruption of the best, a huge theme of this podcast, right?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in the way that Terry generally works, it's not premeditated. It's, and generally speaking, he film and then figure out what it was all about in the editing process, right?
Yeah, and this certainly comes from Bresson too, that the film is made in the editorial process. Right. And so, but let's be clear, just kind of, or at least true, or create a space to not put Terry in the shadow box too. The Tree of Life, for instance, I think the original script was like 500 pages or something like that. Right, it was almost like a novel, and had to kind of be redacted.
Never would have guessed that.
Right. The New World was sold to New Line Cinema as that Romeo and Juliet meets Gladiator.
Really?
Right? That's how that funding was acquired.
Yeah.
Who came up with that terminology? Like somebody in the camp?
No, that's Terry. He's got a very wry sense of humor.
Good.
Too. Yeah, he's
that's funny.
He's yes, sage wisdom, but worldly wise.
Yeah.
So the thing that we sense that not it's so there's nothing kind of really impromptu per se, but every day, and this is one thing that I learned from Terry just when it kind of comes to writing, right? He would come into the editing room and we'd show him experiments and show him what we're working on, and he'd move from bay to bay, and then he'd go back into his office, and you just hear the typewriter firing off. Okay, and generally, what happens is that he'll take a situation or a mood or a moment. Right? What is it that we are to experience in this scene? What words can we evoke or call to mind? It's almost kind of like screenwriting with Rilke or something like that. Mm-hmm. How do we bring these words, and what are the words and meditations that actually kind of capture that? And so what will happen on set is that Terry will bring these pages. And my first job was actually to cut out Terry's voice. So he'll be like, Jess, tell him that your world began when you met him, or right, and he'll just kind of throw things out, and the actor will kind of throw these lines out, and together they're trying to kind of find this mood through these words and meditations. Wow. So it's a combination of both, Michael. Yeah. To your question, is that there is a structure. Now, Terry said that he's disavowed that when he made not To the Wonder, but Radagast. I keep wanting to call it Radagast. Yes, that was a straight script that he kind of attempted to kind of go back and just kind of film something the way that he made Badlands, let's say, which was more of a straight script.
Interesting.
That doesn't come off like a straight script.
Right. You know what I just looked for, Reno? Right. Talking about these ponderous scenes. Yeah. And I haven't watched it yet, but it was really enlightening to me. I work in part of my job, I work with migrant ministry. So before we knew you were coming on, for the fans, we didn't know until a few days ago. I work with a really wonderful priest. He's of Mexican descent, and we go out to the farms and we're visiting. And I was just thinking, for fundraising for migrant ministry, so important that somebody could capture this guy on film, because he's doing the corporal works of mercy. And then I thought of To the Wonder, of course, with Javier Bardem. Yes. And then I remembered that a year ago, and I'd forgotten this, maybe a year ago, that at Cannes or somewhere else, outtakes from that came out with its own title called Thy Kingdom Come. And that went nuts. Have you heard that, Michael?
No, I haven't heard
about
it.
Outtakes of Javier Bardem visiting people. Then it became a written about phenomenon in the New Yorker. Like, these were real people. But they had, Reno, tell us that. How long is this thing? Can we find it on YouTube, or how do we watch it?
I do think that it's available out there. I remember when it came out that I didn't necessarily, I wasn't a big fan of that being released. Yeah. And I try to distance myself. Like, fandom is obviously we can talk all day about the poison of that. Yeah. I guess what I mean is that it kind of reveals that method in style or mode of inquiry to be formulaic enough for someone to take the footage that they acquired, because a lot of that was shot as B unit, right? Yeah. And so, but essentially,
he gave his permission, though, right? Or no?
Yes. Okay, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it is because of how true, right, these encounters are. Yeah.
And especially, I'll admit, the Catholic Church, there's a kind of an ink after it, right? And it's the last acceptable prejudice. So there's a part of me, even though I don't want it to be for me, it's like, oh my God, a kind of positive portrayal of a Catholic priest, right? You know, whenever you're watching media nowadays, you know, we just notice those of us who have been subjected to, you know, notwithstanding all the horrendous, you know, and horrible things. But so here you had one that was very noticeable as a Catholic.
That's right.
And then to hear that you had all these outtakes filmed. But can you say something about why you think, was there a lot of support for this and positive feedback? And what do you think that said?
Yeah.
I don't know how it did. I don't know how it did.
I don't know how it did. I know that that it was when it came out, that it was not a novelty, that it was a maybe novelty sounds dismissive, though. There's got to be a better word to put in. I'm not sure the way that it was received, but what I do know is that there was, as you said, that there was a space, a hunger for those kinds of interactions.
Human first, but then also the Catholic priest thing was somewhat,
Well, that's I don't know if you caught this. There's an interview I caught with Javier Bardem, and he's talking about, I know I'm not a priest, but I put the collar on, and these people want to start talking to me and telling me their problems, and it startled him from what I understand. Yeah,
that's, and I think, and I think the genius is, borrowing from the neorealists, obviously, and the French New Wave, is to not be afraid to take real human beings, and to allow those encounters to give space and time, which is very not Burbank, right? There was a decided no Burbank, not clause, but mantra on the set of Tree, to give space for those experiences to kind of come forth. You can see a little bit of that in A.J. Edwards' Age Out, the beginning of that, as well. This young boy in a youth home, and you just kind of hear these people telling their stories, right? And I think that is so the desire for those interactions, I think, is the thing to talk more about, which is that life, that healing only occurs when life is being encountered, right? I don't know. I need to go back and watch. I actually kind of tried to kind of stay away from it because I didn't want it to, like I said, to kind of
fandom is so funny the way you talked about fandom.
To kind of appear formulaic in any way, but it's certainly not, right? I mean, it's true, and it's a strange artifact that a film from a film can exist on its own because it's not film. It's lives.
Well said.
Right?
I bet you nobody said it quite as clearly as that who's talked about it.
I'm glad that it sounded lucid. It didn't feel lucid.
No. It was,
The spirit was moving.
Might clip that, okay, and post it as a short thing on YouTube. We always talk about like doing good things with this podcast, but we never get our act together. Go ahead, Michael.
No, that's, I mean, so what was it like to watch him work on set? I mean, what did you learn? What did you see?
I got to tell you that how many years is it now? Almost 15 years on, that I'm still recovering from that experience, and not to kind of make it sound too like there's not an awe, but to have the opportunity to kind of it's a masterful work, and he is it's like kind of working with Frank Lloyd Wright, or it's like working, I don't want to bring in a painter that kind of sully it, but
Rilke worked with Rodin, right?
Oh that's exactly
that's
right.
What I was thinking of, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it was actually funny story, not to get too sidetracked, but it was Rodin who told Rilke to kind of go to the zoo, and I think that great poem, The Panther, and these other animals, poems come from Rodin's.
But let me ask you,
suggestion.
like you saw, this is of interest to me, like you saw genius as a space between you and him. Not, you didn't say an unbridgeable space totally, but there was genius. There was this, right? But when you were around genius and you were watching it, you know, you're a very embodied speaker. Every word is coming from your gut and so forth. Do you think you took on some gestures of a creative genius that helped your own intelligence and your own artwork? You know,
I'm not sure about physicality. Terry's a very imposing. Terry is Terry. Like, he is warm, and you know, when I saw him again after 10 years in Princeton, like we hugged each other and went out for drinks, and he's affable and warm and approachable, but he's not. And on set, so there's two things, right? Well, one is the reporting of the event, which Michael, I'll get to, but I think what I hope kind of sticks with me and impresses upon me is that continued search to attempt to open up a space for me to be out of the way, or for art, to move out of the way the initial impression or desire, and to make room for something to kind of come forth from that initial suspicion, right?
That's a great lesson. Yeah, worth
like
a college education.
Right. And so in watching Terry work is, you know, initially there was too much of for me, too much of a like, oh man, like this is happening. But then after you kind of get past that, it's just not being satisfied, or knowing that in this moment we need to continue to elicit and call forth whatever means necessary that we can utilize. We're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna do it over here, and we're going to kind of torpedo this scene by having by changing it, or we're going to continue to throw words out that maybe are nonsensical, but we want to see what kind of dynamism occurs from this moment. And every day on set was essentially like that. Wow. As a matter of fact, on a film set, you have something called a call sheet, right? Which tells you who is necessary phone numbers, and also the scenes of the day. And at the end of every day on Tree of Life, the end of the call sheet said, when the poetry presents itself, you know, which essentially meant like, we're just going to kind of shoot. We know what this story is. The actors know what these characters are, like what can be captured and drawn forth. And so that lack of formula, whilst still obeying or understanding the tradition and understanding the intent of the formula, and that tension is what it's like to kind of be on set. That's obviously, you know, people have told this story from industry ways and kind of as actors, or you know, no one's ever heard the frustrated union grip story, right? And there's plenty of those. But I think that creating a space is the best description that I can kind of come up with. I can give you an example. So and Terry kind of creates these spaces. This is very not Hollywood, but I had you know, the shooting was going on at the house, the main house where the kids and Jess were at, and I was kind of across the street. And it was when they're rolling, you know, you just want to be still, you want to be quiet until you hear the all clear. But I'd noticed a bird nest had fallen, and there was chicks in it. There was live chicks in this bird nest on the yard across the street. And so I went to go tell the second AD, and 30 minutes later, Jessica Chastain, the kids, Terry, they were out there and they were shooting the bird nest on the grass, right?
Wow, it's a great story. It's a great story.
That's just kind of like opening up these spaces. So
that's a good example.
Poetry presented itself, right?
We can move. I can get more philosophical if you want, and I can get more cinematically technical if you want. So I'm just kind of really just trying to kind of draw.
You're going with it. No, you're doing great.
Experiences. You know what I mean? These experiences, which I think is the most important quality.
What did you think about A Hidden Life? In one sense, again, I work for the church. I'm a pacifist. It was my least favorite of all of his movies. I felt maybe the aura of something COVID descending. I think it was a day or so before the lockdowns. I went to a theater, the Little Theater in Rochester, New York. It was the afternoon. I saw somebody, an old friend of my mom's. My mom had passed away 20 years ago, and I saw this lady. Hadn't seen her since then. But I knew COVID was coming, and I went in there, and it was the movie. And then for some reason, and I think what Michael and I, a big theme is like, descending technocracy, right? And that, here's a movie about the Nazi regime, which is a proto-technocracy. It ran like a machine. And I was watching the movie, and it wasn't working for me in the ways, but that could have been colored by my experiences going in. But I just kept on thinking of the role of humor in Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, and thinking maybe this was the wrong subject matter. That in the face of the technocracy, and nobody is better to capture some of it, and that movie was worth it for that. But I almost think the spirituality, you mentioned Krishnamurti and so forth, it's not that he was too serious, but I don't know, I was yearning for something that could really, upset the apple cart of this thing that had direct analogs to the coming kind of twilight here. And I just kept on thinking of Charlie Chaplin. And, what an artist that was, and so those were going on, and maybe, I don't know how that colored it. I didn't think it was a bad movie, but I didn't catch it as much as even some of the more ponderous ones.
Yeah. Right. I mean, obviously for any artist, their films are, they're both biographical and they're not biographical, right? Like to try to read the artist through the film or through the work is folly. But they're certainly in a place where they're meditating on certain things and affected by certain ideas or experiences that cause them to choose certain subject matters or to execute in a particular way. There's a beautiful film by Roberto Rossellini, who I know, Terry is very fond of. Rossellini obviously made The Flowers of St. Francis, but Scorsese tells this beautiful story in his My Voyage to Italy about, I think it's Europa 51 with Ingrid Bergman. And he says, and here in Europa 51, Rossellini is attempting, like The Flowers of St. Francis, to tell the story of a saint. But what is it to have a modern saint enter into the strangeness of this terrible world, and how do we encounter? Are we able to receive a modern saint in the way that an audience can easily receive the story of Saint Francis? And so I wonder if Europa 51 is maybe a better dialogue partner to enter into, because I think the tension, it's gut wrenching insofar as how the love of family and children and matrimony, a love of bucolic landscape, and a world that seems untouched by such things. How does one embrace suffering and turn their back on such things? And I think that feeling that we feel. So here, this is a thing when it comes to cinema too, right? Because we're very colored. However erudite that we either fancy ourselves or actually are, we're colored by the kind of the consumption machine and reciprocity desire of cinema. Like we wanted to do something for us and to either understand it or to be affected, but to leave a film that leaves us gut-wrenching or empty is perhaps the desired effect, right?
I see a lot of Rossellini in that. I mean, I just rewatched recently the War trilogy of Rossellini.
Yeah.
And Rossellini did not sugarcoat it, right?
No.
And that's, which is part of the beautiful thing about those films is he even though it's horrible, and especially in Paisan, there's one of the vignettes there is about this girl, I can't remember her name in the film, who meets this American soldier. And it's when they liberated Naples, and it's really beautiful and everybody's happy, but then after a year of the American soldiers, everything is kind of debauched and the girl's practically a prostitute, right? And then she meets this guy again. He's hammered on the road, and she becomes her real self again, and it doesn't, but there's no kiss, and they don't ride off into the sunset. He wakes up the next day, finds her phone number in his pocket. I don't know what this is, throws it, right? And it's heartbreaking, but it's actually very close to what life is like. And I think in A Hidden Life, and we have a long-standing veneration for Franz Jägerstätter at my house. And Bonnie thinks that's her favorite of Harry, because we live pretty close to the way they're living in Radagast, or what's the name of the town? I can't remember.
I think it's Radagast.
I think it's Radagast. Yeah.
Radagast. Okay.
And Radagast is the
saint.
That's the wizard.
He is a saint, but he's the brown wizard, the Astari.
Yeah.
That's right. Radagund. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But so and that's what really appealed to Bonnie in that. But I think also when we saw it, we also saw it in the theater right before it all came down. To me, it was, I remember sitting there going, this is what's happening right now.
Yeah, me too.
But unlike The Great Dictator, where you get the famous monologue that's always repeated on social media of Charlie Chaplin at the end saying, "Can't we live together as brothers?" You don't get that. You don't get that in Rossellini. You don't get that at the end of The Tree of Life.
What is the quote at the end of The Tree of Life again?
Not The Tree of Life.
At the end of Radagund.
Yeah.
It was a quote.
I can't remember.
Him riding his motorcycle again, and you hear his wife.
Quote at the end of The Hidden Life.
So anyway.
According to the American,
it's
at the end of A Hidden Life,
the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. Remember that quote?
Yes.
And then and that things are not so ill with you as me as they might have been is half owing to the number who live faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. It's a quote from Eliot, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what Terry thinks about that. I'm sure he wasn't thinking the world was going to turn crazy right after that film came out. But I wonder what he would think about how that just kind of played out historically.
Yeah, but look at not to go into that one, but again, the quiet kind of suffering of it under some of those tyrannies. I think we needed more of like the Charlie Chaplin, this kind of leveling type of humor that we send up those people who think they're too important. It could have took the wind out of the sails of some people who are making politicians, scientists, and so forth that got too pumped up.
The thing is, he didn't make the film after
good.
happened.
I totally get it.
Made the film after it went down.
But there's a lineage there with machine type oppression. I guess that's why I'm drawing the connection between, again, for my hero John Cooper Powys. That he says so much to the present moment because he was writing books with an open mind during the 1940s.
So,
did you enjoy Life is Beautiful?
Me?
Yes.
I loved it. I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. My kids actually love that film too. They watch it every once in a while. Yeah, and that too. I mean, a lot of humor in that, but it's also very bittersweet, right?
Yeah.
And I think, Reno, you told me this before with Terry. It all comes down to family, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Is that what he
Okay.
said to you?
Yeah. Whenever I'd send him pictures of the boys, he's like, "Oh, your quiver is full. What a beautiful family."
That's great.
Yeah. Family, and I think for me, my own experience. So this is right. The goodness and beauty, artistic craft, making, happening in a world where nobody ever knows that it happens, right? Just happens. These hidden lives, these hidden beauties. That's there. It really is at the heart. It flies in the face of the machine itself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which
No,
wants
totally.
to kind of commoditize.
And the power of beauty. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah. No.
We just focus a lot on the underworld and matter here, and I just think some of that anarchistic, earthy, dirt up humor is we need to reclaim more. I am projecting a lot onto this, but whatever it is can that gunk up the machine has a lot of my interest.
Yeah.
How about a few softball questions just for me, Reno? You had mentioned Krishnamurti and so forth. I once knew somebody who was like was quite a famous social critic, but you find out like he watched Love Boat with his daughter or something, on every Saturday. Like
Krishnamurti would?
No, this is somebody else.
You almost blew my mind. Okay.
No. But Krishnamurti, who else were Malick's the people he would talk about as being influential? What else did he like? Was there just some kind of popular culture thing he thought was, just really had its finger on the pulse?
Well, I should note, I'm going to plug John's book. John Blaisdell, the film critic, has probably the most detailed biography on Terry's life and work coming out here shortly. Okay. I was able to kind of read some galleys and give some notes. So that was that's coming out. That will have a lot of these things. It's not. There's no real like softball question, or I remember
it's almost like making that genius become relatable.
Because he loves silly things, and he loves humor, and has a beautiful gregarious laugh. But I know maybe it's just some things that I spoke about with him, and maybe that's kind of too narrow. But certainly true. He wanted to make sure that I knew about Plotinus and had read Plotinus and this kind of search. One of my late jobs after I had done some VFX editing was to kind of, which ended up being it didn't end up being, that's maybe overstating it. I don't know, whatever happened to it, but to write a dialogue between the soul and the divine in the vein of the Bhagavad Gita, and so that's something that we talked about a little bit. I remember, we sent out in the preparation for To the Wonder. He had sent out Rowan Williams' book on Dostoevsky, for instance, but. It's not a place. The beautiful thing about experiences with Terry, and even kind of going. So 2 years ago, I went I had lunch with him in Austin, and we had got again talking about education and telling him about some of the struggles I was having with classical education, and he had wanted to make sure that I had read Nietzsche's essay on Schopenhauer. My teacher, right? And the importance of something like that. So here's the thing, but
those
also
are all fascinating.
going to his house for Christmas. Like there's, you know, the space, C.S. Lewis's space trilogy on his shelf. So the when we talk about genius, is this kind of just voracious intake that no one text and no one story really can define him. And in the end, it really will be his films, and hopefully like his films that he will disappear, in the space that his disappearance creates to allow such things to happen through those films is what lasts. And there, in somewhere in there, I mean, we should talk about like how, again, this kind of ties back to sociology, and the way that sociology itself, right, not undermines but challenges the ossification of liturgy in a modern world, right? Or attempts to create a space to not undermine it, but to free.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, actually, when you had that lunch with him 2 years ago, you messaged me right after that. I said, I had lunch with the master. I said, with the maestro. I said, well, did he talk about sophiology? I was just joking around. You said, no, but yes.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great.
No, that's right.
It's funny because when the Submerged Reality came out, was that 2015? Well, we're heading toward the 10th anniversary of that before too.
Yeah, that'll be the 10th anniversary of our relationship, brother.
No kidding. But after that, I knew somebody, Kevin Hughes, my buddy who teaches at Villanova. He knew somebody who knew Malick. And I said, I got to get a copy of my books to this guy, because he's doing in film what I'm trying to do in philosophical theology.
Oh, nice.
But the guy never answered my emails. He kind of cold-shouldered me. You know how academics are. But no, here's the $10 million question for me. And not that I'm not interested. Not that it's not all about me. Is Terrence Malick familiar with sociology?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Ding, 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 ding.
Well, put it this way. He is.
Yeah. Right. I have no. I would be very surprised, for instance, if he hadn't read Berdyaev.
Right.
Let's just
or heard of Soloviev. You know, if he was reading those Germans. Yeah.
So that's, but I think that the way in, so the reason why I began the story, mentioning the Steiner and the Krishnamurti, is that most certainly, that his experience of that he is a sui generis American outcropping of sociology via kind of via
where does he call home? Okay,
I don't know where he calls home. Right?
So I wondered again, if his art being sui generis, like of the American land, he certainly has something very. But then, does he have a place he calls home? Because he produced that movie, that documentary on Wendell Berry, and I've used that in class.
Are you saying as in like physically, like where?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Austin. He lives in Austin.
It is Austin. Okay, yeah.
But Oklahoma is dear to him. Bartlesville is dear to him.
Southwest.
Certainly sui generis insofar as like Emerson is dear to him, right? And this is through his kind of training with Stanley Cavell, or that, again, that's a biographical thing that's silly to try to point down, but certainly kind of was able to kind of develop his relationship with American pragmatism in that way. I guess what I mean sui generis insofar as that he's exposed to and gets like the importance of anthroposophy. And that Steiner was someone who at one point was dear to him, that Krishnamurti is someone at some point was dear to him. And so whatever, like if we talk about sociology, and please forgive my ignorance and you can kind of correct it, but when I think of it as kind of this outcropping from Russian Orthodoxy, right, through this kind of maybe Silver Age thinkers, that his inclinations, as Michael has suspected, are probably let's just say autochthonous, right? That he gets and speaks sophiology from his experiences through these kind of shared readings and his kind of, Christian faith and background and upbringing, that it blossoms with him the way that it blossomed in Russia, let's say.
And I think so. Right. And you see that, and that's what I wrote in Submerged Reality, and I think in Sophia in Exile as well, is that you see this, you see it in Goethe. You see that this kind of sociological intuition arises from people, first of all, through a kind of phenomenological reduction and attention to things as they are, which includes nature and the arts, which allows them to speak to us rather than us telling them, us telling nature and the arts what they mean. They speak to us. And he does that in his film.
Yeah.
That's his film. That's his technique, is letting things speak.
Yeah. I mean, I've got, a story just to that. So let's just say, working on Voyage of Time, Tree of Life was like kind of doing a kind of science with Goethe. We had to read Bill Bryson's book on the history of, I think, was it The History of Everything? He would get really annoyed if we didn't know the proper placement of particular plants or animals in their time. And when working with the VFX department, he's like, "Oh no, there's grass in that shot. You can't use that shot. Grass doesn't come around for another 100 million years or something like that, right?" So an attentiveness to the specificity of science, but for the purpose of, as you said,
the
create space. Well said.
All right, that will probably be a good place for us to wrap it up here. But so Reno.
Yeah, everything you say is fascinating.
An honor and a pleasure for us both. And love to talk to you again sometime.
Absolutely, I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that you had enjoyed it. I feel like to speak poetically about someone who does poetry doesn't make for great radio or great TV.
Oh, I think it did
this time.
Good. Okay.
So because it's involved in real conversation.
You're working on a book now?
Yeah, I'm working. I've got a small collection of essays, which is basically a prolegomena for a larger Tolkien project. So the smaller collection of essays will be coming out soon with Darkly Bright Press. It's a small press out of New Mexico. But then the larger Tolkien's House of Being right now is with readers at Kent State University Press.
Send me any links and I'll post them for the YouTube and the podcast,
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Cool. Grateful. And thanks everybody for listening to the Regeneration Podcast. We'll see you all next week.